Imagine you're on a peaceful hike in the Alps, enjoying the beauty of the snow-capped peaks, when suddenly you come face to face with a corpse emerging from the ice. That's exactly what happened to two German hikers on September 19, 1991, in the Ötzi Alps on the border between Austria and Italy. What they thought was the body of a recently deceased mountaineer would turn our understanding of European prehistory upside down. For this body, naturally mummified by the cold, was not that of a modern hiker, but of a man who had lived more than 5,000 years ago. Older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids of Giza, this Iceman, whom we now call Ötzi, would become one of the most fascinating archaeological discoveries of our time. But how did this man die? For decades, scientists believed they had the answer: a brutal murder, a violent death in the heart of the mountains. However, the latest research reveals a very different truth, a death both more mysterious and more tragic than anything we could have imagined. Let's go back in time to 3300 BCE. Ötzi was a man of about 45 years old, measuring 5 feet 3 inches, slightly shorter than the average man today. His body bore 61 tattoos, probably for therapeutic rather than decorative purposes. Analysis of his last meal reveals that he had eaten ibex meat, cereals, and even traces of fern, possibly used as a remedy or to wrap his food. Ötzi's DNA tells a fascinating story. He belonged to the K1A genetic group, and his closest modern descendants are found in Sardinia and the Caucasus. This suggests that his people were part of the great waves of migration that shaped Neolithic Europe, the populations that brought agriculture and animal husbandry to our continent. But what makes Ötzi truly exceptional is his equipment. Imagine a man equipped to survive in the most hostile environment. His clothing was remarkably sophisticated. He had leggings made of domestic goat leather, a loincloth made of sheep leather, a coat woven from strips of goat and sheep skin, a bearskin cap, and extraordinary shoes made of deer and bear skin, with bearskin soles, insulated with soft grass and held in place by leather straps. His arsenal was that of a mountain survival expert. A copper axe, an object of great prestige at the time, a flint-bladed dagger with an ashwood handle in a sheath of woven grass, an unfinished yew bow taller than himself, and a quiver made of chamois skin containing 14 arrows. Only 2 of these arrows were finished with flint tips and feathers, the others were unfinished shafts. He also carried birch bark containers, probably for carrying embers wrapped in maple leaves to light fires, tools for cutting flint, a kind of grass mat or small net, and various medicinal mushrooms strung on leather straps, perhaps used as antibiotics or tinder. This was not improvised equipment, but the perfectly organized arsenal of an experienced woodsman, hunter, and survivor adapted to his mountain world. However, despite this expertise, Ötzi was not in perfect health. He was lactose intolerant and suffered from Lyme disease, the oldest known case of this infection. His joints showed signs of osteoarthritis, particularly in his neck, lower back, and right knee. His lungs were blackened, probably from spending time near open fires, and his intestines contained parasites. Examination of his fingernails revealed lines indicating periods of intense physical stress or illness in the months before his death. How did this well-equipped and experienced man come to die in such a desolate place? For years, the prevailing theory was that he had died a violent death. 10 years after his initial discovery, advanced X-ray technology revealed a stone arrowhead lodged in his left shoulder. This discovery immediately pointed to a violent scenario: pursuit, conflict, ambush. The story that emerged was that of a man who may have been a warrior, the victim of an intertribal conflict, or perhaps an outlaw fleeing his enemies. The arrow would have pierced a major blood vessel, causing rapid and fatal bleeding. This theory had prevailed for decades. Head injuries reinforced this hypothesis of violence. Several depressions and fractures had been identified on his skull. Researchers interpreted these as evidence of a violent blow, possibly inflicted by a club or blunt object during a confrontation, either before or after the arrow attack. The scenario seemed plausible: an arrow wound that incapacitated him, followed by a fatal blow to the head. But science is a continuous process of examination, re-examination, and refinement. Over the decades, Ötzi has undergone increasingly sophisticated analyses, from high-resolution scans to detailed forensic pathologies. And these new analyses have begun to challenge established assumptions about his final moments. Researchers at the University of Zurich have conducted new investigations, harnessing the power of modern medical imaging to examine Ötzi's remains with unprecedented clarity. Their findings have led to a significant shift in our understanding of the Iceman's death. First, regarding the arrow, The new detailed scans have provided a much more accurate understanding of how the tip penetrated the body. The analysis revealed something surprising. The stone tip had not penetrated as deeply as previously thought. It had ruptured a blood vessel in the shoulder area, but had not severed any major arteries that would have led to massive and rapid blood loss. Their analysis estimated the total internal bleeding caused by the spear wound to be only about 100 milliliters, or about half a cup. Although incredibly painful and debilitating, possibly making it difficult to use her left arm or move quickly, this amount of blood loss is not generally considered rapidly fatal. It was a serious injury, undoubtedly, but perhaps not the previously assumed murder weapon. As for the head injuries, high-resolution imaging allowed researchers to examine the head trauma from a different angle. They concluded that the depressions and fractures on Ötzi's head were more consistent not with a targeted powerful blow from another person, but with an accidental fall. When traversing steep, rocky, and uneven alpine terrain, a fall is a very real risk. Ötzi was wearing remnants of a fur head covering, which, while perhaps not offering complete protection, could have cushioned the impact of a headfirst fall, resulting in significant but not immediately fatal injuries. Like the arrow wound, a bad fall would certainly have disabled him, leaving him vulnerable. If the arrow wound was not directly fatal and the head injury was probably accidental, what ultimately killed Ötzi? Researchers have come to a conclusion that is both grim and perhaps more plausible given the environment. Ötzi the Iceman died of cold. He succumbed to hypothermia, dying from exposure to the extreme cold of the high Alps. This revised scenario paints a different picture of Ötzi's final hours. Wounded by the arrow, perhaps suffering from pain and restricted movement in his shoulder, possibly dazed or injured from a fall, he found himself high up on the mountain pass as the weather was likely deteriorating. Unable to descend quickly or find adequate shelter, perhaps weakened even by minor blood loss and the shock of his injuries, his core body temperature began to drop. Hypothermia is an insidious killer. It brings confusion, lethargy, loss of coordination, and ultimately unconsciousness and death. This conclusion does not necessarily negate the presence of conflict in Ötzi's final days. The arrow wound and hand injuries clearly point to some form of altercation taking place prior to his ascent. Analysis of pollen in his digestive tract and varied isotopic signatures in his teeth and bones suggest that he moved frequently between different altitudes, possibly indicating a nomadic or transhumant lifestyle, or even that he was fleeing from something or someone. The mystery of why he was shot remains, but the how of his death, according to this research, shifts from direct homicide to an end where his injuries rendered him fatally vulnerable to the overwhelming power of nature. A death that reminds us how much our ancestors were at the mercy of the elements, even the most experienced among them.